When you're pioneering a new path, it's easy to feel alone. There's a whole tribe of people just like you who are on the mission toward building life-giving, family-oriented businesses with their spouse.
We're Nathan and Patience, 5-year business owners and marriage and business life coaches. This is a conversation about the how, the hard, and the hope that comes through stewarding the beautiful things God has called you to. Today, we're talking about mental health and how that relates to work and working together. Because I think a unique thing about working together is you kind of have two relationships, but they also blend. You have your marriage and then you also have your work relationship, and both affect each other. And mental health definitely affects both of those. To start off, I would love to hear a high for your week.
This week we are taking a break from shows at night because we kind of got into a habit of doing that every single day. And, it's not that that's not healthy for like a season, but for us, I specifically just kind of want to reevaluate, like maybe not doing it as often. And it's been really nice. Like, I don't know how you felt about it, but we've been just like reading or playing games or just kind of relaxing, doing yoga, like just like other things besides just sitting and watching a show. And so I've been enjoying that. I'm excited to explore what that looks like and new things that we discover about ourselves and each other with that.
Yeah, it's been really good. High for me is definitely the kids.
Yeah.
It was Joe's birthday this week, yesterday, and it was just so much fun. Just so much fun to see like the world through her eyes and her have like those childhood memories and like just like what she's into and like the toys. And then she took ballet today.
And I think that it's really going to grow her in her ability just to listen to instruction and to, go with the group and kind of pay attention to the world around her and the people around her. So the most important thing is she just had a blast and she absolutely loved it. Everybody said, like all the other moms were saying, how passionate and joyful she is. And she did a really good job. So today we're talking about mental health and just navigating that in work, specifically ADHD. So kind of to preface this, like we're not physicians, we're not psychiatrists or psychologists or therapists. We're really just talking about like our experience. And I have not been ever formally diagnosed with ADHD. Like I have all the symptoms, textbook symptoms of ADHD. But I think that's the boat that a lot of us find ourselves in as adults is like, hey, we haven't been diagnosed, but we're still facing some of these symptoms and these like ways that we navigate the world. And my hope is that in sharing what I've experienced and how we've worked through that together as a couple, that it can encourage other people that are finding themselves in adjacent situations.
Today, we're talking about mental health and how that relates to work and working together. Because I think a unique thing about working together is you kind of have two relationships, but they also blend. You have your marriage and then you also have your work relationship, and both affect each other. And mental health definitely affects both of those. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about just your experience of ADHD.
Yeah, I took some notes so I don't go everywhere. But first I wrote down just like I Googled symptoms of ADHD. I just did a quick like Google on like some of the top symptoms of like being a person that has ADHD. Absent-mindedness, difficulty focusing, aggression, excitability. Sorry, it's just so me. Impulsivity, irritability, forgetfulness, mood swings, anxiety. So I experience all of those things. It's interesting because, and we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but it is both an inability to like stop focusing on a task and an inability to focus on a task.
Yeah, it's both.
It's an inability to pivot, but also an inability to stay on one thing.
Yeah.
And my feeling about it as just how I've navigated it, again, not from like a therapy or psychology perspective, the way that I've chose to see it in myself is that it is the personality that God gave me, and it just comes like any personality with strengths and weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
It is something that I have to manage on like a physical level with my lifestyle. But I also think that there are so many beautiful aspects to that. I think it makes me a more creative person, a more just adventurous person. But I think it's definitely been challenging for both of us to kind of navigate at times.
Yeah. I just also want to start out and say that I really appreciate a lot of like your ADHD, like what makes like those pieces of your personality, um, because they're unique and like I don't see those things in other people sometimes. Like you have such a willingness to like just jump on an adventure or like be quick to like adopt an idea. There's not like a hesitation to take a risk. Like I feel like we have so many fun memories and we've also done so many things in business together because you were willing to take those leaps that no one else would have been willing to take. And even the willingness to just dream and think outside the box when it comes to like work or lifestyle, because you're like willing to go there. You're willing to explore new ideas. You're excited to explore new ideas. And I also think it's important too to recognize any of these things that kind of like fall on the spectrum of like neurodivergent. Um, they're such a gift.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that our culture is such like you have to fit in this box, and even to succeed, you have to like check all these boxes. And there's so much more uh, just beauty in life than just checking the boxes of
Mm-hmm.
what like up to success looks like to other people. So whether it's ADHD or anything else, like mental health related, or neurodivergent related, there is so much beauty in that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you do have to like figure out how to navigate the world maybe a little bit differently than someone else since this is the world that we live in.
Yeah.
But there is so much beauty in it.
Well, thank you. I I see that at times, and yeah, other times it's just a big struggle. But yeah, I think on my best days I would put it in the category of neurodivergence. And then on the worst sides of it, it does I wrote it down as an overactive or extra active brain.
Mhm.
It can lead to things like anxiety and depression.
Yeah.
But I was not ever diagnosed with it, and then when I started learning how to drive was actually when like I was missing like really important things when I first started learning how to drive, like stop signs and like other cars and stuff. um, Sorry, it's not that funny, but it's a little bit funny. So I started looking up like, okay, what is it about people that miss things like stop signs and like really obvious things? And immediately realized just like from Google search that it was people with ADHD that deal with that. And so it kind of opened up a world for me. And honestly, it was a blessing to realize like, oh, okay, I've dealt with this my whole life. Like the inability to manage my time with like school assignments. Like I would just really like pick a really elaborate task and like have no idea how to manage my time to like complete that task. And then it would lead to anxiety and overwhelm. That was like a really self-inflicted. Like I would create these really exciting challenges for myself and then not have the follow through to complete them. You're
So do
smiling.
you.
True. I think maybe I've gotten a little better, but so when when we were dating, I think there were like signs of it. Like you definitely knew that was my personality. Like
Yeah.
I remember one time you brought me like a really sweet gift and I left it somewhere. Like I was like, "Oh, thank you." And I put it down in a public place and lost it. And we spent a while like trying to find it again and getting it back. And but I think when you quit your job and came full time, like to work at home with me,
Yeah.
it, I think you understood it from a deeper level. And I also understood it from a deeper level because now the decisions that I was making in my entire day were directly affecting another person.
Yeah.
So I think we saw it a little bit on the weekends as far as like you are a very, very efficient person. I would say like more efficient than the average person. And again, like maybe like there could be mental health things with that too.
Yeah.
But you are an extremely efficient person. And with my personality and the way that my brain is wired, I am not an efficient person. I yeah, like I can't focus on a task. I get really distracted. I get really excited by like whimsical ideas that are not in reality. Um, like, oh, let me, I don't even know. Like I need a new bath mat for the bathroom. And then like I'll just be focusing on that and go shopping and get a bath mat and bring it home. And it's like, you didn't even clean the bathroom. Like, just like things like that, like that type of thing. I don't know why that was such a random example, but but yeah, I think that it became a lot more of a struggle for me. I don't know. You can speak for yourself if it was a struggle for you, but when we started working together full time and those differences became so apparent, there were definitely times it was hard for me to not feel like my personality was a burden
Yeah.
with the way that we ran our
Yeah.
business.
Well, I think that you probably felt like it was a burden sometimes because sometimes it did cause like conflict.
Mhm.
And so like we had to work through that. And I think that we have found a lot of healthy ways
Mhm.
to manage that. I think that you're more likely to listen to me now as far as like if I'm starting to say like, I think that might be too much, or like it feels like that's like too elaborate, or like
Yeah.
that's gonna like overwhelm us. You're
Yeah.
more willing to be like, oh, like maybe it will.
Maybe I should listen to that
Yeah.
voice.
And
Yeah.
then I also think that like occasionally I would want to put you too much in a box of being like nothing can be elaborate, nothing can be whimsical, nothing can be
Right.
just for like the thrill of it. So I think I've also learned to be like, what are the things that like won't consume an entire week, consume an entire day, like disrupt everything
Mhm.
that like are gonna bring you so much joy, whether it's
Mhm.
like you having these hobbies or like crafting or like whatever
There's
it is.
so many things.
So many things. But like making sure that you have spaces for those because it is like a piece of who you are.
Yeah. I think you've really grown in that, and I would like to think that I've grown too in my ability to control my mind more, and know when I need to just kind of focus on a task and get something done. I also think that, like, you talked about neurodivergence or, whatever you want to call it, just like diversity in the way that people think and act.
Yeah.
Um, I think the ideal in modern American thinking is that you have to be this like complete person who is good at all the right things and can accomplish all the right things in your life. And honestly, like I think God made us all have so many weaknesses because we're meant to lean on him and to lean on each other. I need to have the humility to realize like I will never be super efficient at things. And that's who I am. And I have other giftings. And so to continue to grow in that, but to try to grow to become the best version of the person that God made me,
Hmm.
not try to like fight against my personality.
Yeah.
Um, and like, I think to realize like I need to lean on you because sometimes the way that you view a situation is the best way to view a situation. And maybe sometimes the way that I view it is the best and sometimes it's an in between. And if we didn't have each other and like didn't have that conflict of having to work through our differences, like we wouldn't have the strength of being able to lean on each other
Hmm.
in our different ways of seeing the world.
Well, and
Um
I think that really compliments me too, because like we talked about, I'm an overly efficient person and I only think of things with like, is this time worth it to me? And I think that you help me to see that there's things that are just worth it just because they're worth it.
mhm
And they aren't bound by time and there
mhm
isn't like a cost of time to them, which has helped me so much just to like take a step back
mhm
and see the world differently.
mhm truly, like I've always kind of thought of myself, and this is going to sound so pathetic because honestly it is, but like a mad scientist but without like the science knowledge.
Just like the
Which is just a
creative knowledge.
mad person. But like those mad scientists in pictures of movies where like their hair is crazy and they've just been spending all day like trying to work on this one thing and they're fixated on it and like their house is a mess and they can't like on it, like on the I feel like deep within that is like the person that I am. And so it's like, okay, how do you love that about yourself and appreciate your creativity, but also and exist in the real world?
Hmm.
Um, I was looking up to see if there was any like studies about this or anything, and there's no really like conclusive studies, but I really feel like because ADHD people both like are a lot more receptive to thinking of new ideas and they also are a lot more willing to take risks that entrepreneurial couples, especially creative entrepreneurial couples, like there's a high percentage of those people that at least one of them has ADHD because
Yeah.
that's kind of the personality that brought them into that situation in the first place.
Yes.
Wanting to be full-time creative or wanting to have their own business and kind of operate off of their own way of wanting to live their life.
So many of the creatives that we know
Yeah.
and like work with or probably have some form of ADHD.
Yeah.
Not naming any names.
A lot of them. Yeah. I can't think of many that don't, honestly. A couple of the challenges I wrote down specifically, like not being able to hear when someone is speaking to you, and that's something I've dealt with all my life, but like truly like being so zoned out in a different world that you don't hear when someone's saying something over and over to you. And the hardest thing about that now is that like it affects my kids. Like Zeke will be like, "Mom, mom, mom," like multiple times. And so it really motivates me. Like I want to continue to grow in that because I dealt with that with like friends growing up or siblings. But it wasn't, it wasn't as motivating as like my own child is trying to speak with me.
Yeah.
Oftentimes it is when I'm on my phone. And so I'm trying to grow in that of not having my phone with me as much when I'm around, just like playing with the kids. But even without, like, I will be off thinking about something completely different and truly zone out everything around me.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, sometimes kids just say things over and over.
yeah.
Sometimes I accidentally zone out.
Yeah, that is true. Maybe that's why it happens more with them. That makes me feel a little bit better, honestly. Um, Inability to face ordinary tasks. Obviously, it's not an inability. It's like I have the physical ability to face a task. But especially when I've dealt more with anxiety and depression, the fear of like the ordinary or like boredom is very real. And my brain almost has like a coping mechanism of wanting to think about anything else that stimulates my brain more than an ordinary task, like washing the dishes, cleaning the house, doing like budgeting or emails, things like that are very mundane. It's very difficult for me to have like any desire to do that. And I will procrastinate on that extremely, pursuing something that is not productive, that is more mentally and emotionally stimulating than the ordinary task.
Yeah. I think we both struggle with that.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
that's something that we have a lot of things in our marriage that are like we complement each other on, but I actually think that's something we don't complement each other on. I think it's a
Yeah.
overall weakness that we both have had to work on and are continuing to work on. But I think I have a major avoidance
Mm-hmm.
to like we were just even talking about this yesterday, but major avoidance to like wanting to be bored,
Mm-hmm.
or wanting to like not if it's something that's not chasing like something that feels like really like a high ideal,
Mm-hmm.
it's like really visionary, or it's not just something that's like fun. Like I don't want to face the real world, and I think that also comes from some mental health things too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that like I for a long time had like a lot of trauma, and so I didn't want to face the real world because to face the real world was to face like myself.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that I've grown in, but I'm still growing.
We love the Enneagram. I know not everybody loves it, but for us it's been really helpful. And something I love about the Enneagram is it talks about like your personality and your giftings, but also each of those personalities has a shadow side. So I think part of that too is like you being a 3 and me being an 8. We're both in like future minded people.
Yeah.
And the shadow side of that is that you do not want to be in the present.
Yeah.
That you're pursuing so focused on the future that you're not willing to be still in the present.
Yeah.
Um, Other things, losing things all the time, my keys, my phone, my mind, jumping from one thing to the next. Like, we might have already talked about this, but like, I'll be making the bed and then I'll be like, oh, I got to organize my jewelry. And like, oh, I got to, respond to this text. And like, I never finish like the first task that I started.
So much of it ends going to Target.
So much of it ends going to Target.
You like start to make the bed halfway, and then somehow you're like going to Target
I'm like,
5 minutes later.
I
And I'm
think
like,
a new accent pillow would look really good on this bed.
I'm like, maybe we should just finish cleaning the room.
Yes. Inability to focus in a mess because mess can be so distracting for me. Also, inability to be clean. Because it's just the distraction of like I'm so focused on something that I don't think about putting away the thing that I got out.
Yeah.
So I'm slowly growing in that, but I'm still a pretty messy person. And the mess also is very agitating for me. And so it's kind of I would say that's I think a common struggle. Restlessness, daydreaming, struggling to manage your time. People with ADHD truly cannot see various tasks as being prioritized. I will see all these tasks and I don't have a concept of how long they will take or how they will like fit into an hour or a day.
Yeah.
And as much as like I can use past experiences and things people tell me to try to like navigate that. Like, I just don't have a sense of like time and how
Yeah.
long something's going to take. I also think that could be a blessing because I can throw myself into something that is just going to take a super long time and it's worth it in the end.
Yeah.
But it takes so long that if I knew how long it was going to take and I was able to process that and consider it before I started, I probably never would have started it.
Yeah. And I don't have the ability to do that. So I don't start certain things.
Yeah.
So it's a huge strength for our marriage. But then there is other times too where like we'll literally have multiple things in a day. And it'll be like there's a heavy, heavy deadline on this like huge thing. And you'll be like, well, let's spend the whole day like trying to find the right skill for it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, like we have to do the deadline.
Yes.
Uh
Or I'll say like my whole day is stacked with meetings and I'm also going to finish editing this wedding film. And
yeah.
I don't have a sense of
And then you quickly become
that.
overwhelmed.
I become overwhelmed and I become discouraged and frustrated with
Yeah.
myself that I can't accomplish enough when,
The expectation was too high to begin with.
yeah.
Yeah. I feel like I'm always telling you that. Like, hey, like why don't you just put like a little less on your plate?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like at the end of today, you're gonna feel really discouraged because it's unlikely you'll accomplish it. And that
Yeah.
also sounds bad language, to be like, you're not gonna accomplish that. But
Especially as an A, like I don't really like to hear,
yeah,
I don't think you can do that.
I know. So I feel like I've also changed my language. I'm like,
Yeah.
you probably could, but you probably shouldn't.
Or like, do you think that's the wisest way to spend your day? Or is that what would bring you the most joy? Like, I think ways that you've said it like that have
Yeah.
helped. Um, Honestly, that's a huge tip is just like learning as a person who has ADHD or ADHD like symptoms, and the way that your brain works, like listen to the person in your life that doesn't have ADHD and like listen to when they talk about time or when they talk about things like that that are hard for you to measure. Like let that person be like, let their way of thinking be another tool in your toolbox and lean on that. You don't have to just lean on your own. I mean, the Bible says lean not on your own understanding, right? And anywhere that there is wisdom, whether that's in the word or in like the wise counsel of other people that have different strengths than you need to lean on like the way that the Lord might be leading you through the way that they're talking to you about time or things like that. My ADHD, I think, was like extreme postpartum, like just out of control. Um, and I just couldn't get anything done and was really frustrated with myself. I started going to therapy for birth trauma after our first was born because he was a C-section, unexpected C-section, and honestly have stayed in therapy ever since because I realized with the way that my brain works and just everything that we like to do in our lives, like probably always going to be something I need to talk about in therapy. So
Yeah.
that has been a huge game changer for me, and that's
Yeah.
like an obvious, but
But your therapist is also such a good mix of like therapy of like unpacking the past,
yeah.
but she's also so good at like how are you going to like accomplish your goals and
Hmm.
like what does goal setting look like for you? How do you want to be a good mom? How do you want to be a good friend? Like
Hmm.
um it's not like I feel like you're just like always unpacking.
We just talk about like, okay, the way my brain works.
Yeah.
And I love just that positive approach to it because like this is who I am and it's the way that God made me and I need to accept that about myself and figure out how am I going to function as the person that God made me in a way that glorifies God the most.
Yeah.
Therapy has been a huge tool in my toolbox as far as helping me with navigating that. And then sugar intake, like really limiting my sugar intake. I don't eat like a ton of sweets. I do have like sugary coffees sometimes. But lately I've been going to this bakery in town that's open a little bit later than a lot of coffee shops to meet with clients. And they have gluten-free pastries and stuff. And so I would always get like a muffin or a cupcake or something. And I just noticed like when I would have those meetings, I would feel so like out of it, like just like looking around the room, like can't focus, can't stay on one subject, like, and just would kind of be down on myself about like how the meetings went as far as like just being a good communicator. And I realized like I think a lot of it was that I was eating sugar while having the meeting. And for me, it just shuts my brain down. I feel like my brain is just working so hard to like produce insulin and to like deal with all the sugar that's coming in my body that I don't need right then because I'm not using that much energy, that it just shuts my brain down and it makes it very difficult for me to like focus. And I think that's true for everybody, but it's specifically true with people that have like an easily distracted kind of overactive brain.
Yeah.
Another thing is exercise. So when I was a teenager, I think that's why I would just run. I would run so much because I would not have brain fog like when I would run like 5, 10, 12 miles or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but as an adult, like I've started this past year going to the gym regularly. And for me, that's like 3 days a week. But then I also try to incorporate activity in like those days that I'm not. So, like, I'll go play pickleball or go for a walk with the kids or do yoga or something like that. Um, and because it's a regular habit, I know when my body's starting to feel like, okay, I got to make sure I don't miss the gym this day.
Yeah.
And then now that I do it regularly and I do CrossFit, so it's like a pretty intense form of exercise. I've just found that for me, it's helped so much with that overactive, like that overstimulated brain.
Yeah.
It helps me to feel relaxed and calm and honestly just not be as irritable and be able to focus on tasks. Another thing is like caffeine. So obviously in moderation, but caffeine, because it is a stimulant, can really help. It's interesting because you would think a stimulant would make the like ADHD brain more hyperactive, but it's actually like depressants, things like sugar that shut your brain down that make it harder. Like, so stimulants actually can help your brain to relax and to focus.
Yeah.
And so caffeine, you know, it helps me. And so I do drink coffee every day.
Yeah.
And when I started learning how to drive, I actually would start to have a cup of coffee before I would get in the car and do my driving lesson. And I started doing like way better. And so alongside other things, I think like it can be very, very helpful.
Yeah. Also, going back to the therapy portion,
Mm-hmm.
because there's one thing I want to touch on. We've also found it helpful. I haven't went to your therapy appointments very often. It's just
Mm-hmm.
not realistic with like having kids, and also it's like the space that you need for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But there has been some times that I've went with you,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been so helpful in like better understanding who you are and having just that space for like you to put language to yourself and really to hear you, and then also for your therapist also to like speak into both of us. It's been like extremely helpful. And
Mm-hmm.
so whether someone's struggling with ADHD or
Like
any
anxiety,
type of
depression. Yeah.
any type of struggle or thing that they're trying to overcome or find tools for, having your spouse go with you
Yeah.
can be so helpful.
Especially when you're business partners
Yeah.
because you're together all day and like it validates like my need to exercise or my need to be careful about sugar or things like that.
Yeah.
It validates that and like gives language to that so we can both be on the same team as
Yeah.
far as I think ultimately like when you have a mental health struggle or something that you're trying to work through about your personality, you are the person that has to deal with that. You cannot like lean on your spouse to take care of it for you. Ultimately, it's something that you have to take full responsibility for. But at the same time, as the spouse of somebody that is, if they are working on it and trying to actively grow in it, there's ways that you can like come alongside them.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think it can be unhealthy when like the spouse that isn't dealing with that is doing all the work to try to compensate because the
Yeah.
other person is at a place where they don't care or they're not trying to grow in it.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think as the spouse that's not dealing with that, you need to sometimes take a step back and like have some boundaries. Like, okay, regardless of whether you get anything done, I am going to be like, keeping things going. And there's been times I think when we've been more in that place where like I've been so in a place of anxiety and distraction and things like that, that you've really just kind of had to be like, okay, well, I'm just going to have a boundary and get the things done that our family needs today. I feel like we're more a team now as
Yeah.
far as like, okay,
Absolutely.
I'm actively working on growing in that. I'm committed to the things that we've committed to accomplish together. But you can also help me with like understanding where I'm at and reminding me of the tools that I have
Yeah.
to get tasks done.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to talk about is just like spiraling. And again, this is my personal experience. I don't know if this is something that everybody deals with, but it's also an anxiety thing. But I used to have these really bad, just like waves of spiraling with starting with like maybe an exciting idea like, oh, we're looking for an Airbnb, what about this one? And then I like fixate on it and I start thinking about it and it's the only thing that I can think about. And then I start to get overwhelmed with like, oh, this is a new, a new business idea or whatever. It's like, okay, well, would this work? Would this not work? I start to get really overwhelmed. And then I just kind of like break down emotionally. And it can last like a long time, like half a day or something. Like sometimes this spiral of like
I was gonna
an
say
idea,
longer than that.
multiple days, an idea, excitement, overwhelm, crash.
Yeah.
And it used to be, I still experience that, but it used to be that idea, excitement, overwhelm would turn into anxiety spiral, like in the fetal position, crying, can't stop, what's wrong with me, like really bad. And I just remember so many times of just like feeling completely out of control, like completely like frustrated with myself, not knowing what was wrong, not knowing how to deal with that. And that does not happen anymore in our marriage. It hasn't happened for, I mean, it's gotten progressively better, but I would say, I think about a year that it's been that hasn't happened. And I attribute that partially to exercise. Um, Having an outlet. It's like if your brain is an instant pot, like having an outlet to let that steam out.
Yeah.
Um, but also learning that anxiety response, it like your body is always trying to come back to a place of balance.
Yeah.
And so waiting it out and knowing
Yeah.
that it's like I think my therapist described it as like a bell curve. Like it goes up and it gets really bad, but it will come down within minutes, like 10, 15 minutes if you stop stressing about it.
Yeah.
Like and worrying and being like what's wrong with me, and then that can cause it to continue. Um but realizing like, oh, that anxiety response, like as bad as it feels, it will come down and then I will be okay again,
Yeah.
has really helped me to, when I'm in that place of spiraling, to just be still and let it be for the moment and not let it define my whole day.
Yeah.
Because I think it used to be like, and now I'm spiraling and I have an anxiety and then that causes me to spiral and then I just feel out of control. I feel like I can't get anything done. Having the pressure cooker release of walking and going to CrossFit and just being, I'm a lot more of an active person now. And I think that's just a better fit for my personality, has helped a lot, but also just the knowledge of like how my brain works and
Yeah.
knowing that that's not going to last forever. So those are a few of the ways that I have really grown in my ability to feel successful. I think that like I've accepted that like the way that God made my brain, the way that it works, like that it just is what it is. It's a blessing and a curse. And I hope this conversation though was encouraging to you if you find yourself in that place with ADHD or something similar, or even just like resonate with that feeling of like there's days when I'm like, what is wrong with me? Like I just feel like I'm not able to accomplish the things that normal people, can accomplish. Um, but I've learned that like there are so many ways to navigate the world and feel more successful in it. And also to accept that like this is who God made me and that there are gifts to it and there are blessings to it. And so many times like it can feel like a burden to our family, but I think that you've helped me to see that it's also a huge blessing to the
That's
way that we
not.
run our business.
Yeah, it's not a burden, that it is only a value add because you're bringing something so different to our businesses and to our marriage and to our parenting and everything else that we do.
I just think if you weren't full time in our business, um, like you would only know half of like the things that I experience
Yeah.
with it, and it's been so life giving for us to be able to navigate that together with grace for each other and with humility. I hope this conversation was encouraging to you. We may do a part two at some point, but yeah, thanks for listening and have a good week.